You're told to be in this chat last time by Rachel?
Whoa. Joel, that was definitely not me.
Alright, well. Hello,
Hello.
Infinity Life. Vegan. Okay, I'm gonna put this on my bed.
Hello, Twitch and YouTube. Sick.
Quite a bit of Rachel already. Well, you're lucky.
That's right. That was the
Yeah, you
response.
should.
Oh, it's very hot here. Is it very hot in LA as well?
No, it's kind of nice actually. Like
Ugh.
this morning, I was walking
As soon as I leave. Okay. What?
because it was like a little cloudy in the morning, and then during the day it was sunny. But I like when it's cloudy in the morning
Yeah.
because that's when I have to walk.
Cloudy mornings in LA are nice, I would say.
Yeah.
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 Weather's pretty good here, as you might guess.
Yeah. We're all
Yeah.
jealous of you being in Hawaii.
Yeah, I know.
I wouldn't get as much chess studying done if I was in Hawaii, so
Yeah, I
you're the
definitely
best.
get less chess studying done here than in California.
You're
That's for sure.
not going to the beach every day in Hawaii. Why are you even?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah. I met a few people here this time. Well, I was talking to a few people. I guess I'd met them before maybe, but I talked to a few people who said, yeah, when they first got to Hawaii, they went to the beach every day, and then after a few years, they lost their passion for it.
The passion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sad. It's like if you eat your favorite food every day, then at some point it doesn't become your favorite food anymore.
Yeah.
So, moderation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does he live in Hawaii though? That's cool. Yeah, I think he's in Hawaii right now.
Yeah, I don't live
How
here
long are you in
permanently.
Hawaii for?
I don't live here permanently, Ito. I spend about 2 months in the summer here generally when my kids are out of school.
I've been one time for a few days and that's it. So I'm a little bit jealous.
Yeah.
The poke was insane, and it was just like the grocery store poke. And ever since that, any other fish that I've eaten was just so subpar in comparison. It kind of ruined it for me.
Yeah. We have some friends visiting this week, so we took them to this really good place to get poke, and they were really confused because it's a liquor store. But in the back of the liquor store, behind 5,000 bottles of alcohol, there's like a little corner where they serve poke, and it's really like the best.
That's awesome. It's always the hole in the wall places that have the best food.
Yeah.
Yeah. If someone told me that becoming an IM would be nice, I would get to go to the summer in Hawaii. Oh, I would still have been an unrated patzer, but I'd feel worse about it. Okay.
Now your chance, you can still
That's
feel
not the
worse about
direction
it.
I. Yeah.
Little known perk about being an IM. Oh,
Yeah.
wait, you guys can't see my board.
I have yet to play. I need to do a stream where I play some rapid games with the Gruenfeld. I haven't actually played, other than the sparring, I haven't played games with the Gruenfeld yet. So.
Oh, hello, Sack Checkmate.
Do you
I'll
not
give you a
yeah.
shout out.
do you not randomly play some Blitz and Rapid or Bullet or stuff like that here and there?
I do. I
do?
just haven't had the time with other studying things. So
Okay.
I'm like, oh, if I have like 30 minutes, I might as well do tactics or like look through the
I
game or
see.
something. So.
Okay. I saw Matt playing Blitz for a couple hours today, so he's got time in between his studying.
Damn, he's out.
But Rachel's all studying this month, huh?
Well, I mean, yeah, I need to finish all the studying before I reward myself with some Blitz and Rapid, I would say.
I see. So late in
A
each
reward.
week.
Yeah.
Late in each
Yeah.
week, you can binge.
Yeah. Also, Dave, I was gonna ask you if you have like recommendations on something to play against the London. I literally for the very first time got the London in Chicago, and I played the King's Indian, and I ended up getting like a weird perk position. And then after that, like some of our like higher rated friends just told me to play like I don't know, like E6 C5 or something, and I just kind of like I got it again, and I just played that, and it worked out fine.
Oh, the
Um,
Jabava London.
yeah, the
You want?
Jabal one. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Like
Anushka,
d4, bishop f4.
do you
Yeah.
have something that you like playing against
The
London?
London?
Yeah.
Any London, I basically just play like, okay, I go knight f6 and then I go d5 and then I go yeah, c5 and then I go knight c6 and then I go queen b6 and then I just like try to play like anti-London basically. So yeah, but the person that she's talking about had like a very specific line against the Jababa, which is like, I don't know if it was e6, maybe it was like
Well,
knight f6, e6 and then d5 against the Jababa London.
so Rachel, did
Um,
they play knight c3 against you on move 2?
they played bishop f4 on move 2.
Bishop f4. Okay.
Yeah. So I just like literally the only thing I knew. I just played like knight f6, e6, and c5, and then eventually d5. And just like figured out from there. Like put the other knight on c6, and yeah. But it worked out fine for me. But I guess knowing a little bit more theory might be nice. I guess. Um, but I know that also like you could just play d5 right away, like bishop f4 and then d5. Yeah.
Okay. I'll think about it.
Yeah. File to get whatever someone from your chat said that they like playing d5 right away. It looks like.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think if to fish, that makes sense.
Yeah, I just don't have experience with those kinds of positions, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing about it is it overlaps with your current repertoire, right, of playing Grunfeld and King's Indian.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when they play knight c3, they're threatening e4. So if you keep playing
Yeah.
a King's Indian, you'll actually play a Pierce, which you're maybe
That's what
not
happened to
exactly
me.
ready for, right? So if they play knight
Yeah.
c3 and you play d5, then you're going to be playing a Grunfeld setup. And if they don't play knight c3, then you can play a King's Indian with your pawn on d6. And, you're looking to play the move e5, right? In the face of the bishop on f4.
Yeah. Right.
So
Okay.
that's probably what I would suggest that you just brush up on a little bit.
Okay. Cool.
I'm also adding a goal for the tournament, which is I wanna accept the England Gambit and accept the Smith Mora and like double accept the Benko if I can. So I'm trying to learn those instead of the like whatever I was playing before to avoid it. Yeah,
Okay.
just that's what I'm trying to do. So hopefully it doesn't backfire.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Good to know.
Do you fear that doing all this training in public will make it easier for your opponents to prep against you? I mean, our opponents aren't gonna know until before, and it's not the risk reward is not worth it, I think.
If they prep against my like specific training, then like awesome, because then they're telling me what my weaknesses are, and then they're like hyper training me more, right? They want to put their time into doing that.
I've had a lot of students over the years who were worried about training being public or their openings being public. They were making, super secret accounts to play Blitz on chess.com, afraid that an opponent would find out that, oh my gosh, they played the Sicilian or something like that. And what I always told them is, like, if you're doing work. Oh, also, they would be like afraid to spar their opening because the person they're sparring with is learning about it at the same time as them. Right? And my answer to this has always been like, if you're doing the work, you're getting ahead. There's no remedy for anyone else. No one else can at the last moment be like, oh, look, I can see like they practiced this or that, here's the game that they played, here's this or that, like I'll quickly. No, because if they try and quickly look at what you've done, they won't understand it because you've done real training. Right?
Yeah.
Like they could be like, oh yeah, I'll play into this opening. I saw like Anushka was sparring it with Rachel. Then they play into the opening and you know it better than them because you spent like 6 hours sparring it, right? And they spent 10 minutes noticing that you played it, right?
Yeah.
So the only way for anyone else to get ahead of you, in my opinion, really, is for them to outwork you either on time or on like the smartness or quality of the work they're doing, right? So if you're doing good work and putting in good hours, someone else they have to watch the stream, see what you're sparring, and then go spar at more hours than you're sparring with somebody else. And like, nobody's doing that. Just be confident that you're outworking everybody. If you're bringing up your training partners along with you, the three of you will pass the other 100 people, and that's fine.
It's also likely that the three of us will play each other. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, is that Kostya? I was sparring, or I did opening sparring with Matt, and we ended up like just to practice his French, and he plays the winnower, and then the only line I learned was just like someone spent like 15 minutes explaining to me what to do against the French, and that was kind of all I'm going off of. I play like bishop d2, and then I hang my like e4 pawn and push d5. So anyways, like a specific sideline that he'd never seen, and we just spent like the whole time sparring that like specific sideline. And I went to this like chess club last night, just like a social thing at this bar, and like I got in that exact like sideline with the guy, and I just like destroyed him.
Yeah.
And then I was like, yeah, because we had like sparred that position like multiple times from multiple different angles, and I texted Matt after that. I was like, dude, it's like not even. I saw that and I was like, yeah, this is like down. So that was perks of the endgame sparring for sure.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. You do the extra work, and there's no replacing it for someone else.
Yeah.
Should we get into today's episode?
Yes.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This is Endgame Apprentice. Once again, we are very privileged to be joined by Bloodqueen and Rachangel doing their private training in front of the whole world so that everyone can prepare for them and try and figure out what their weaknesses are, which, as we've just been chatting, is kind of useless because they're eliminating those weaknesses as they train. So it's like by the time you figure out the weakness, oops, it's not there anymore because they were just sparring. Today we're going to continue with a theme that we touched on last episode with Rachel and Matt. We did an episode where we took a Gruenfeld type position and a Queen's Gambit type position, and we played two Rook and Bishop endings, but with this very slightly different structure. And I told them that practicing this kind of endgame from an opening structure that's really typical for an opening you play is going to help you play that opening better. Not just because 1 out of 4 games, or I guess that's average. For Anushka, maybe like 3 out of 4 games you'll get to an endgame, and so you'll actually play a position like that. Rachel, maybe only 1 out of 10 games you'll get to an end game like that. But because as you're playing your games, it's telling you who does or doesn't want to take what trades. It's helping you evaluate all your choices in the middle game as you're considering possible end games that could arise. So we did that yesterday, and today we're continuing. We're going to do a sparring, which is at the same time opening sparring and end game sparring. So does one of you want to click through the moves and show folks the position we're going to be looking at today?
I don't know. Do we have permission?
Yeah, I just gave you guys both permission. So
Okay.
yeah,
I can.
go
Okay.
for it.
Yeah, it's a Grunfeld,
Yeah.
and it's this line. So I've gotten something like this over the board.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I know, Anushka, at some point you studied some Grunfeld opening theory. So I was curious if you'd seen more or less this line with the queen trade early on D2 before.
Yeah, I got this in Chicago Open actually, and my opponent played like D5 or something. Like after I played Rook D8, he played D5, and I played E6, and it was a whole game. But I know this line. I don't really like have it memorized anymore. Like I would have taken first before playing this. I didn't know that this was theory. So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So there's a couple alternatives along the way. Like black could play either Rook D8 or Knight C6. And then depending on how white plays, there's a couple different options. So I'm not teaching you exhaustive opening theory here, right? we're just going to play a sample position. It can sometimes come from the rook d8 line, sometimes from the knight c6 line. And it's to some extent like a typical looking Grunfeld endgame. So the idea is not I'm giving you full theory here, but that we're going to find some themes which are going to be relevant. And this is a line that kind of straddles between opening and endgame, right? It kind of goes almost straight to the endgame. The position we've got here, if you had one more rook off the board, it would definitely be an endgame. With 2 rooks on the board, it's still kind of like in between being a middle game and an endgame. But I think we'll get good endgame practice by playing this position anyway, because, well, it's somewhat unlikely that most games one of you will get mated before any pieces trade, right? So we'll probably get a fair amount of endgame play here. And so we'll get to see this kind of classic trade-off here between the pawn structure that white has and then some activity that black looks for with their bishop pair or with the position of the white king. And because we have imbalanced minor pieces, that has some interesting endgame implications that are useful for players who don't even play the Grunfeld, right? I mean, just learning how does the bishop pair play against the bishop and knight? Can the bishop and knight use the central presence to be as strong as the bishop pair or not? So there's some useful themes here for people who play any opening, but in particular, I think for you two, it should be also opening training, because it'll help you to think of what direction your game's going even while you're playing the opening. And the further along people get, you'll see that masters and international masters and grandmasters, more and more, their opening study often starts in positions even 5 moves deeper than this. Because they'll have been playing an opening for years, and they'll have picked up some theory and see some other seen some other grandmaster games that they're following, etc. And so they'll sometimes pick a position even a few moves deeper than this and say, I really want to investigate the position after. And they might say, rook c5, f6, rook b1, e5. They might specifically want to look at a line even further along, right? So often their opening study will start around move 20 or so with some sparring. And here we're kind of straddling that a little bit for you all. Again, I'm not expecting us to be exhaustive and have sparred all the different alternatives along the way, but I think it's just going to be a useful position to play out. I'm going to use an intermediate time control here today. So we're going to use, we're just using a really weird time control for the sake of getting in a couple games, because we're starting really on a early move number. So if I gave you a 30-second increment, these games could be pretty darn long, or there might even only be one game. So let's try for 15 minutes plus 10 seconds. And at least hopefully get you each one game with white and one game with black.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's longer than I thought.
What's that?
That's longer than I thought.
Yeah. I'm giving you something. I didn't want to force you to play blitz here. And I'll just mention, in the position before rook c5, if white plays rook c6, bishop b7 would have been black's idea. Okay? It could be playable. You could look at that move sometime if you want, but that's partly why white's not just smashing the rook down on the pawn. And so rook hd1, you could see it would be played to reinforce the d4 pawn. Rook c5, it might be played to potentially bring the second rook over to b1 and try and attack more of the queen side with rooks. Or it might be played to control the e5 square, either to stop black from playing e5 or because white themselves might want to play knight e5. And you're welcome to try rook c5 or rook hd1. And as black in these positions, you can try one or two different ideas. I would not spend a minute on your first move. Not only will chess.com abort the game, but I sent you this position a few minutes ago, and I also want you to feel free in the first couple moves of a game to try out an idea that looks okay to you. It doesn't have to be best. Just try it. And if you make up your mind after a few moves that you really hate it or something, you could just resign and we start a new game. Or offer a draw and we start a new game if you're, whichever one you want. The result doesn't really matter. We can just move on to another game if you reach a point where you think like, oh, this idea is obviously not worth repeating. Feel free to end the game and get in more reps of what you think is more useful or interesting for you.
Okay.
Any thoughts or questions about what we're doing today?
Are we gonna talk about our initial thoughts on the position, or just get right into it?
Yeah, if you've got a couple initial thoughts. I mean, that the evaluation is going to be somewhere near reasonable because it's a bunch of theoretical moves, right? So I haven't hung pieces for anybody, so it's just it's somewhere between 0 and plus 0.15 or something like that. So that you kind of can assume. But if you want to say something about what your first thoughts are of White's plans or Black's plans, go for it.
Oh, well, I don't have something specifically that I want to say, but yeah. I just know that's like the usual method, but
Yeah.
I'm happy to just get right into it.
Yeah. Anushka, you have anything to give us other than just some moves?
Well, from what I know about the Grunfeld, my idea as Black is to try to like attack your king or do things with tempo because your king's in the middle. So like maybe like C5 or F5 or E5 or F5 or things like that are very normal. I don't know which one is good, but we can figure it out.
Yeah.
And yeah, bishop pair. What else?
Perfect. That's helpful.
I wonder if like trading the rooks would be even better. So then you have the bishop pair versus the bishop and the knight. I'm not exactly sure if that's how that works, but that could be
Right. So a difference
interesting.
compared to some standard Grunfeld positions is this pawn is on C6 instead of, let's say, B6 or B7, right? When the pawn's on B6 or B7, she might try just playing rook C8, trading some rooks, playing a longer endgame. But here, because her pawn structure is a little bit scuffed, she doesn't have the normal queen side pawn majority. She's going to go with what is also one of the main ideas of the Grunfeld, which is to play sort of active moves. See if she can harry White's king or just create the right kind of position for the bishops to shine.
Yeah.
Okay. Super good. So, yeah, you can challenge each other to this position. 15 plus 10. Doesn't matter who's White first.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess we could give Anushka White first.
Should I challenge you, Rachel? Do you want to do it after Rook HD1?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to play white or do you want to play black?
You could just click random and see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can also play the moves to get here if you want. We can leave the sound on and I can help you get there if you
That
want.
actually might be helpful just for me not having played the Grunfeld.
Just for Rachel getting in a few more reps of having played the Grunfeld.
Okay, so just a normal 15-10.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'll find you here.
Yeah, I don't know if I remember this as white per se. So maybe.
Okay, I sent it.
I'm just clicking it through it really fast. So C5 and then Queen 8.
Well, we can talk about it. Like I can tell you, or David can tell us, because like this is different than what I play too.
Alright. Okay, I thought I accepted your friend request, but it did not.
My friend request?
Or sorry, your friend request. Your game request.
We're friends now.
Wait, are you in live? It was all a ruse where we've never been friends.
Oh. Okay, I'm gonna send you another challenge.
Okay.
I don't know
I'll just
about
sit
you,
in
but
live.
my chess.com says it's taking longer than usual to connect. But you
Alright.
guys seem fine on the stream, so I'm not sure. Okay, let me try. I did a random color friendship over, I guess. No, that's not what I meant to say.
Okay, I'm not. Ooh, okay. Yes, I got one.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, great. I'm white.
So I have to play d5 before you play e4. I remember
Yes.
that.
Exactly.
And then
She's a Grunfeld pro, basically.
I take this. And then this. And then bishop g7. Okay. I guess I'll have to look at some lines where you take my knight and I take queen takes d5 and see what to do there.
Oh,
Oh, was that wrong? Oh, sorry, c5. My bad.
yeah. All right, let's go. Let's try and recover that with queen d2,
Okay.
c5,
Okay.
rook c1, queen a5,
And then queen a5.
knight f3. Now, had we played this move order wrong as black, in that position instead of knight f3, white could now play d5. The point is the
Right.
c3 pawn is defended by the rook on c1.
Right.
Or d takes c5 or d5 become extra options for white. So that's why as black we go quickly queen a5, cd, and trade the queens. But now you can make up for it. You can play cd.
And then trade the queens.
Yeah. And now there's either knight c6 or rook d8.
Okay.
And then bishop b5.
And then rook d8.
Rook d8. We'll trade on c6. And then freedom for Anushka to choose her first move here. Oh, and since we played out the opening, she won't get flagged if she chooses to think for half a minute. But I would encourage you not to spend, 3 or 4 minutes on one of the first moves here, because we just try something and then try again.
Yeah, I'll try this one first.
Cool. Okay. All right, I'm going to turn off my Discord audio and enjoy.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, so rook d1. I say principal idea is overprotecting this pawn on d4 to get out of the way of moves like c5 and e5, so the king can get out of the way relatively quickly now. Notice that on king e2, there's maybe bishop a6 in some cases, but if the king goes to e1, a bishop on a6 would sort of look pretty, but maybe do nothing. Could be that kind of piece. If the bishop went to g4 instead, then there's definitely the possibility of trading for this knight here. It can't escape because of the rook. By contrast, this rook c5 line, I think one of the ideas would be that if black goes bishop g4, you can escape that trade with knight e5, hitting the bishop, hitting the pawn. And I once had a position very much like this, opposite colored bishop ending as white. I think it's pretty nice for white. So I'd say the move rook c5 makes bishop g4 look a lot less good. The move rook d1, bishop g4 is very possible. Rachel attacks e5, which I was just thinking is maybe the point that rook d1 defends the best. So e5 kind of doesn't respect that much. Bloodqueen steps aside, and so Anushka's got this pawn defended 3 times now. And if black plays simple trades here, which I don't think that she will, but if black played a bunch of simple trades here, this position would probably be good for white. The bishop pair's been broken up, and this pawn remains as an unpleasant weakness. Right? Are there drawing chances? Sure, plenty of drawing chances, but it looks generally bad, right? It steps in the wrong direction, steps towards a position that could be good for white. So we get the check, and now Anushka just steps backwards, and I think she might not mind having gotten checked. She may have thought, I go to the best square with my king. If black chases me off, then that bishop's not so good on a6. Can't go to g4, can't go to e6 to attack the a pawn. So this might have been mildly luring that bishop to a6 on purpose, you know? All right, so now Rachel's thinking it over. Pure concession e4, bishop d4 doesn't look good, but white is threatening to take the pawn on e5, right? So it's a real question. Like, what else are you going to do other than trade? Yeah, c6 is hanging and e5 is hanging. I feel like this is a line which we're probably going to say is pleasant for white. Let's see if Anushka wants to really offer that dark squared bishop trade. If she tries to bring the knight to a good square right away on d4 to pressure c6, she does give Rachel the option of going straight to opposite colored bishops. So let's see. What else does she might have to calculate bishop d4, rook e8. Because before, when I showed bishop takes d4, that was very obliging of black to trade and bring white's pieces into good position, right? Normally, you would let white trade and bring your king into good position, leave their knight on f3. So here, a key move would be rook e8 with the idea of bishop takes g7, rook e4 check, winning a pawn plus the game, you know? Even here, we don't even have to recapture yet. We could potentially put our rook on the second rank, protecting the c6 pawn, and then recapture. And, you know, white's down a pawn, plus they're just trying to defend their second rank from black's rooks, you know? So it looks pretty tough for white. Yeah, Anushka did a little thinking here, which is nice, and then she took with the knight, allowing the opposite colored bishops, but she's perhaps ready to answer rook e8 with f3, although then f5. That's exactly kind of the feel that black wants, is that kind of stuff capturing stuff. If black just gave up the bishop pair here, just played the absolute simplest option, does white have much in this position? We're attacking two pawns, but I mean, black could play a passive move like this and everything's defended. I don't see much for white. Black could ignore that and just go rook e8. It seems quite playable as well. Doesn't look like white's going to have a huge advantage here. So the real big question is bishop d4, rook e8. Huh? Bishop d4, rook e8. e5. f6. Oof, it just doesn't quite work out for white. That's surprising. This move is so hard to deal with. I don't personally see a good answer to this for white. You play e5. Technically, you save your pawn for the moment, but all the light squares are good for this bishop now. And even just the move f6 looks like it's really hard to defend even a dark square here against black's light square bishop, which is bizarre. Rook c6 is answered easily by bishop b7. Take and take. Or take without taking, you know, either way. Black's comfortable. So somehow, e5, king here. I thought it might go in white's favor, but this check followed by trading looks okay. I don't see any refutation. Or I don't see any way for white to even, you know, show any serious problem with what black's done. So we got knight d4, and here Rachel's thinking about it. She could also still try rook e8 with the idea of f3, f5. She could play more complicated. Depends how excited she is about black's position. Yeah. They're both, you know, they're both fairly, like, ambitious players, you know, so it's not a big surprise to see Rachel go for something aggressive versus some kind of, you know, simplification, solid approach with bishop takes d4. So she goes for this. Knight c6, rook e4 is not going to be good for white. Rook c6, bishop b7 is not going to be good for white. So you'd expect something like f3, f5 here. That'd be the most basic expectation. f3, f5. And then rook c6. And that bishop on a6 is having trouble finding places to go. F3, F5, rook c6, bishop b7, rook c7. It's not so easy for black to find somewhere for that bishop to go. Bishop takes d4, e5 line. Okay, Foos is saying, I had this line I suggested before. With bishop b7, rook c7. Okay, that's bishop d4. Rook e8. e5. f6. Rook c6 here. Rook here. Going after a7. Now, possibly bishop takes. Possibly also just pawn takes pawn first, Foos. Right? And if rook takes, then we take here. It's pretty decent. This might be simpler than trading off on f3. But yeah, you were wondering about takes. Takes. Bishop a7 here. Right? The idea is really rook d7. Because, I mean, rook e6 to a6 would deal with the a pawn. All kinds of things would deal with the a pawn. It's not that good. Bishop's covering a1. Could play e4 even. This rook move could be slightly annoying. Yeah, it's not easy to stop rook d7. That might be a problem for black. Let's try it without bishop takes f3 for a moment. We'll go here. I don't see rook g7 as very plausible. I don't think white has anything to try and win with at the end. They don't have, you know, a passed pawn anywhere. Taking on e5, black takes, that's bad. So maybe just retreating the bishop and covering the king. And now we could play bishop f3 for a tempo. But it's still rook d7 that could be the issue. I mean, even here, seems like white is actually a smidge better in the end, Foos. This is really looking deep into this line to notice that white's a little bit better. My instinct is not to take that knight, but to keep the bishop pair. But this is not a very impressive move if I want to stop rook d7. Maybe like this. Come to the C file. Try and chase this piece. If you go rook d7 and I trade rooks, it's a draw. I'm going to be pretty confident. So you have to either win this pawn very cleanly or keep two rooks for the 7th. So if you keep moving around, I'm going to keep following you with my rook. Let's check if you grab the pawn. Takes, takes, takes. So now on rook a8, there's rook d7. Now the key is I need to get my rook like here. So let's try this move. Rook here. Okay, I'm sure they've played some other moves by now. But this is a very tricky and critical line that Fu's pointed us towards. So that's why we looked at it for a little bit. It's definitely a little bit dangerous for black. Definitely there's a little danger here. But maybe I managed to hold it together. I would need more time to be more certain about this. Okay, so in the game, bishop G... No, sorry. In the game, ED4, knight takes, rook E8, F3 defending the pawn, F5 going after it, and now rook C6. Anushka puts in some time, and this is the concern for Rachel, is that this bishop has sort of nowhere to go. Because bishop b7, rook c7 looks like it's only helping white even more. The bishop can no longer go to e4 with the pawn on f3. Like when the pawns were on f2 and f7, bishop b7 takes e4 was easy for black. Here, we're looking more like at a move like bishop c8, right? And then when black takes on e4, maybe later white will play f4 to keep the bishop a little blocked in. And yeah, we might see white able to achieve something or other here, right? Maybe we start knight b5. That stops bishop d7 with this rook. And it has the idea of knight c7. In fact, against fe4, we don't even need to spend a tempo on f4. We just play knight c7, right? And that's going to be a plus for white. So now we're trying to play knight c7. We're trying to play knight d6. You know, we're maybe taking on a7. Yeah, it looks worrisome for black. I don't think Rachel's found an answer yet. Yeah, so she's still thinking after rook c6. She more or less opted into this with the critical decision not to trade on d4 right here and go after the e pawn. You know, trust in the bishop pair, trust in the white king on e1. You can understand the themes that are guiding black to feel like, yeah, it should work out for me, right? I've got the bishop pair, that king on e1 looks bad, I've got f5 coming, you know, I've got dynamics. But concretely, where do we put our piece? Is fe4 here worth an idea? That seems like a wild sack. Rook takes. I guess you want to take here. And then the king goes here. So white's got a knight against one pawn, it feels to me. Yeah, I personally don't see how this would be plausible for black. Bishop b7 is the choice. So now it would be rook c7. Imagine these couple of moves are a little bit easier for white to play than black. So Anushka should try and get like a little time lead here. You know, rook c6 could have been played quickly in my opinion. Then rook c7 could be quickly. You can put a little pressure on the opponent. Because in chess, sometimes your position is better or worse. Sometimes your opponent's position is better or worse. But there's also something separate, which is how hard or easy are your moves to play. Sometimes you've got a bad position, but the moves are easy to play. Someone else has the advantage, but their moves are very hard to play. In those situations, the person with the bad position wants to at least take advantage of the fact that their moves are easy, right? Play those moves quickly and then the person with the good position feels all that weight and responsibility of proving the good position when it's really hard to find the right moves. So I think it's important to recognize when a couple of your moves are easier and your opponent's moves are a little bit more unpleasant, and try and put some of that pressure on them. Get in your easy moves. I guess it wasn't that easy if Bloodqueen didn't even go for rook c7 though, huh? Here, yeah, Rachel should not really trade on e6 because that would leave the bishop on g7 attacked. So she first takes off this pawn and then tries to keep the bishop blocked on b7. But essentially, do you see what the maneuver rook e6 just did? She had this powerful rook on c7 that black is not really able to challenge, right? And sent it, essentially traded the worst piece in Rachel's position on a8, right? See what a bad sequence this was for white? Spending time to go trade on a8 with that rook. Position remains interesting, but that's a major mistake for Anushka to go trade off that piece. I mean, even just rook c2 would be better than going and trading your rook for that one. You never want to make that effort yourself. All right. So there was a question about what the students are training for here, right? So Anushka and Rachel do have a tournament coming up, and Matt and Kostya, all four of them are playing in this tournament, this Maya tournament in Portugal. And, they're in general training around the clock, around the year anyway, because they're all pretty into chess. But it is helpful to have a specific event now and then to sort of narrow our focus a little bit. So I had each of them come up with a goal for the tournament in a month. And then I put together a training program for them, which includes, a bunch of normal elements of the dojo training program, but also a few little tweaks to help them work on their goals. I've been thinking of doing a longer video, maybe 3-4 minutes on this subject, but I'll give you a 10-second version of a very important chess idea. I'll just blow it right here, which is that some of the best improvement happens when you create the following cycle. Tournament. You play some serious games. Analysis/reflection. You look over the games you played and figure out some weakness or two weaknesses or something that was like a problem for you at that tournament. Training program. You're going to train for a couple weeks on something that you think might counter the weakness that you saw as a problem there. In addition to the plan of how you're going to train for a couple weeks based on the games you played and then looked at, you're also going to set a goal for what you expect of yourself at the next tournament related to the training you did, right? So you've got training that's related to the lessons that you learned from the games you played, and then you go to the next tournament and you've got a goal for how you're going to perform on that thing you were just training on, right? Like, I'm going to be more patient in good positions, or I'm going to be more decisive in good positions, the opposite kind of goal, right? And then you play another tournament, and in the tournament you play better because you're focused on that goal you had. You play the tournament, and then we come back around and start turning it into a cycle, right? After we play that tournament, we look at the games. We figure out, first of all, how do we do on the goal we had before the tournament, and what's our current, what weakness do we see now? Should we keep working on the previous goal, or should we move on to a new one? And then again, by looking at our games, we decide if we're going to continue with the previous goal or move on to a new one, or same area of chess improvement, but we increase our goal, right? So if it was to reach the end game with 20 minutes on the clock, now we're trying to reach the end game with 25 minutes on the clock. If we've been working on our time management, right, you might up your goal a little bit. Or if your goal was to get good positions in 4 out of 9 openings, Now your goal is to get good positions in 5 out of 9 openings. So you can create incremental and specific goals in whatever area you're working on. So you have a choice to increase the goal a little bit or to switch to a new goal and then do your next couple weeks of training, head to a tournament with a new goal, and around you go. All right, let's catch up with them. So after f4, trying to keep this bishop locked down and leave an isolated pawn for white's king to strike at. Rachel thought for a while and brought the rook to the open file, right? It was now blocked by the e-pawn. Put some pressure on the knight. We're going to get a trade here and here. Now it's black's move. She could go into opposite colored bishops by saving this a pawn, or she could keep her bishop pair and potentially sack a pawn. I would not give up my pawn. I say that she gives up her pawn. Any reaction from either player to that pawn on a7 being sacrificed? Mild surprise to David. I see a little bit of potential agony there from Rachel. Maybe she just realized that there was a choice between the bishop pair and the pawn, and now she's wishing she didn't just give a pawn. Okay, we just got to move from Anushka. Let's see if she's munched. She's munched. Pawn is a pawn. Now Rachel's got to steady herself a little bit here. Goes after the knight and the pawn on a2. Oh, everything's okay. How nice. Knight c5, there's a pretty awkward move for black bishop d4. You know, a little bit awkward. Wait, bishop d4, knight takes e4. Bishop takes a7, knight f6, check. Whoa, that's weird. Hang on, look at this. The point of this is on bishop a2 to win back the pawn. But if you go bishop d4, seemingly freezing their pieces badly against the side of the board, it seems white can draw with this stupid move. And that's an unusual little tactic, I gotta say. That's a weird pattern. You could stare at it for 30 seconds before you convince yourself that white's not hanging a piece. If bishop takes e4, there's bishop d4, and if bishop a7, there's knight f6, and the pieces are so crisscrossed and weird, you might think there are other options for black, but really, you know, the options are to take one or the other of white's minor pieces, and then it's actually only 2 branches. It's just visually boggling to me. Okay, so here she's thinking after bishop d5. If she plays a move like knight g5, you know, then black can trade on g5, take on a2. Somebody in chat was suggesting knight g5. If knight g5, you can trade, and agree to a draw. You know, that's enough. That's enough for the game. So bishop d4 was played. Bishop e6, bishop f6, bishop a2, draw. I would say I'll probably intervene in about 30 seconds if they don't end this game and tell them to move on to the next one. I mean, in the heat of battle, they shouldn't be thinking about ending the game. It's helpful for the sensei to step in now and then in a situation like this and tell the players that they can stop. In a game, it's great to just, you know, go all out, not even think about offering draws, just keep looking for stuff, play until there's nothing left. And these two like to avoid draws and, you know, keep looking for ways to win. Bishop e7. Super bizarre. Super bizarre. You see that there, right? That will to win from Rachel. Foos correctly points out that if you trade like this, then white should play on. Because then there's a knight against a bad bishop, right? For black, if you were trying to draw, which you should be, this is the clear draw. You take this way, and this way. And with opposite colored bishops, I mean, I would honestly hope that these young women could draw against Magnus in this position. But Rachel wants to win, so she keeps the bishop pair on the board for the moment, technically speaking. Knight c5 comes in. So now, if bishop a2, white will take the pawn on e4. Kind of want her to take here, and start a new game. Maybe I should just stop him. Yeah. Bishop a2. She's going to go back to d5 to try and recover her pawn here. All right, we'll let her keep cooking a little bit, although if she avoids bishop d5 because of knight f6 check and tries to win this down a pawn with, you know, king f7 or h6 or something, that's going to be getting into Gukesh territory. But yeah, I mean, I'm like this too when I play against Kostya. You know, Jesse has to stop me because I just want to keep going and going. And it's also, you know, you're fighting for every little moral victory, right? You want your opponent to feel lucky and beg you for the draw, so that next game against them, you've got that psychological initiative, right? That they feel like lucky to have gotten a draw, and they know that no matter what happened, you were pushing them around. Here the knight was attacked. There was never time for white to play a4, right? The knight was attacked. All right. Good job, Anushka. Okay. Great work, you two. That's enough for this game.
Okay.
Let's agree to a draw.
Yay.
You've done good. I know you would have kept going. You have incredible fighting spirit, and I commend you on it. You should definitely keep playing to your heart's content at all other junctures, except right now I want us to get more games in, so I'm going to cut you off.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Any thoughts about how this went? Before we play another game, let's see. The first big decision was to go for e5, right? Did either of you have a strong feeling afterwards that e5 had been a good or bad move?
I wasn't sure. I just was like, okay, first couple moves need to be a little bit faster.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes.
Right. Yeah, perfectly. And then once
Yeah.
you saw how it went, do you feel like the move was good or bad or still unclear?
I wasn't unhappy about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't like ecstatic about it, but I wasn't like, I made it work, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was okay with it, I think.
Yeah. Anushka, any thoughts on e5?
I felt like I should have something after e5. Like e5 didn't feel right. But then I don't know, there was enough. What?
Oh, it didn't feel right to me either, but I wasn't sure why either. So, but I was like, I need to do something in the center. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because like when I get these, I always play f5. Like I don't usually play e5.
Mm-hmm.
And e5 in the Grunfeld, it's like usually like sometimes it's a thing, and even when it's a thing, I don't like my hand doesn't want to play e5. So like e5 is not like a me move to make. But like whatever I thought I would have, I didn't, because yeah, bishop a6 check, I didn't even like consider that it was a move. And then when you played it, I was like, oh, that's actually like that's pretty good because I wanted to go to F1 or I mean, it's not like it did anything, but you're controlling a lot of squares in my territory and like rook c4 and stuff, and it's hard to defend my e pawn. And then yeah, I debated between bishop takes d4 after you took on d4 and knight takes d4, and after bishop takes d4, I was anticipating bishop h6, and then I was gonna play rook takes c6, and I thought I was good there. But then after bishop takes d4, rook e8, I didn't like any of the ways to like I could take your bishop there. But then like I didn't like any of the ways that I could defend the pawn. Like if I go knight d2, then you can go bishop d3. So I just didn't like it vibes wise. So that's why I took with the knight so I could play f3. And then after I played f3, I realized you could go for f5. And then I was like, I'm definitely not better here. Like I don't know what to do.
I think honestly, looking back on it, I think I like e5 because I was like, oh, your king's in the center, like, just like basic, like keep putting pressure on the pin piece or whatever. And I always felt like I was in control of like the decisions that were happening, which I don't really feel like that usually for like most of the game. So yeah, because then like it was like bishop h6 and then like pressuring e4. It felt like I was able to like try and attack things, and then you would play like really nice defensive move. Like I really liked bishop d4 at the end. It was really fancy. I was like, oh, this is cool.
Let me check something with Anushka's calculation. So Anushka, you mentioned that on bishop takes d4, you correctly found rook e8, right? This annoying move.
Yeah.
And then did you calculate bishop takes g7, king takes g7, knight d2 there?
Yeah, and then bishop d3. But I didn't really look at this too clearly. I was like, oh, there's things.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there I can play f3 now I'm seeing. But before I didn't see that.
So when you were looking at that line, you weren't looking at rook takes e4 check as an in-between move, right?
No, I was not.
Okay. Because that was like the key reason that white can't go for this line was that in-between check. So I'm just checking where your calculation's at, obviously, because I'm trying to help with your training plan overall. So that rook e8 line, I was thinking that somebody in chat pointed out there's like a pretty critical line where you could play e5 after rook e8, which looks all sorts of wrong, just weakening all the light squares. But we looked at a really, really long line with, e5, f6, rook takes c6, bishop b7, rook c7, and black takes on f3, takes on e5, white takes on a7, and it was not totally clear. And not as dumb for white as I thought it might be. So that line was pretty interesting. Bishop d4, rook e8, e5.
With the doubled f pawns?
Yeah. Because it's not even about the doubled f pawns. Like if you get one rook to c7, you play bishop takes a7, you're looking to bring the second rook to d7. Doubled rooks on the 7th rank.
Oh, bishop takes a7.
Yeah, doubled rooks on the 7th rank plus the a pawn could be pretty scary, and it doesn't really matter what's left on the king side for white.
Oh, that's
It was a very weird.
Wait, sorry, could you say the line all the way through?
Sure.
I got lost.
Sure.
So
it goes rook e8, e5.
Okay.
f6 for black, maybe not the only move, right? Black could play a passive move like bishop b5 or rook c8, and maybe none of this matters, right? But f6 is probably the first kind of move either of you would look at, right? Just sort of the straightforward move going after white's pawn and king. So we play rook c6 for white, bishop b7, rook c7, bishop takes f3, g takes f3, fe5, bishop a7, and in this position, white's idea is rook d1 to d7, as well as a4, a5, a6. Wrecked structure, but it looks pretty tough for black at the very end. So there's probably.
I would have never even considered e5 as a move here.
Yeah, there's probably some good alternatives. Anyway, we're gonna move quickly towards another game. I'll share one or two ideas with you, which I don't normally do, but I thought the move rook d1, it looked like the main point of rook d1 is to strengthen the d4 square. So when I saw e5, I thought, oh, that's slightly surprising, right? Black's trying to attack straight into the point that white is kind of defending the best with rook d1. But then when I saw this idea with e d4, rook e8, it was like, oh, it's not so maybe e5 works really, really well. And now I'm wondering if after e5, white should maybe put the king on somewhere like c2 or c3. Now, I'm sure the plan was not to put the king on the c file, blocking the rook on c1 initially. But actually, since there's a pawn on c6, it's not an open file for black's rooks, not an open diagonal for black's bishops. And the idea for white would be, let's just get the king off the d file, force some trades on d4, simplify to some technical position where my king on c2 or c3 will still be better than black's king on g8 in the end.
I'm assuming after ED, I would take with the knight.
I think with the
And
bishop,
then
because
just 5.
you take with the
And
knight,
bishop h6.
black can always get the if you take with the knight, black can always go for the opposite colored bishop trade on d4, and the advantage is pretty small. Bishop d4, bishop h6. Now here's a doozy of a move for white. Bishop f6. Boom.
Oh.
Yowza.
After bishop check, I just move.
There's no bishop check, is there?
Or back
The
to
king on
g7.
c2, right?
Oh,
Or...
bishop f6, bishop f6.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's pretty...
White king could potentially be on c2 or c3 in these lines, which will lead to slightly different tactics, right? But
yeah.
But this position,
yeah, you gotta take that rook, right?
Looks
yeah.
vaguely
or
promising for white, right? That's kind of...
Yeah.
It's like, how do I play this feels like an only move that I wouldn't see over the board or here or like,
Bishop
so like, how
f6.
do I play these positions and not, yeah.
It's not 100% an only move. Like, how bad would it have been for you if you just played rook to b1 here? Responding to that threat on your rook?
Not that bad. I guess the line that I was looking at, I was going rook c2, and that obviously loses. And then I would just see that, freak out, and then not play bishop takes. That's like how my brain would work.
I see.
So
yeah.
I'm gonna run
it's like
to
I
the
have to
bathroom.
see it. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, on the one hand, you could maybe just play rook b1 and just keep playing. Another thing that might be kind of like heresy to you is there are some positions where you might even be able to play bishop back to e3. And the point is, obviously bishop f6 is way better than any of these other moves, right? But if you had to play like a position like bishop e3, your point is when you break up their bishop pair, your knight has options for playing around the remaining light-squared bishop. Your king's on the queen side, and your goal is still to kind of win their c-pawn or get a rook to the 7th rank because your rooks are on the open files first, right? Which like the rook b1 move also tends to do, right? Is you want to take these open files, trade a few pieces, and then land on a7 or c6 with, a rook or a bishop or a king even. And then just, try to convert an endgame with a small advantage.
Okay.
Yeah. So my thought would be, and I'm just experimenting with pushing you all in a certain direction a little bit, but my thought would be that if we want to try e5 again as black, either you or Rachel, and you don't have to play e5, but if one of you wanted to play e5 again, I would look at either king c2 or king c3 for white and see if that makes those rook e8 moves a little less tactical for black, right? Because rook e4 check won't be check.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's, yeah. So Rachel, I was just saying, I'm just like helping you guys a little, pushing you in a certain direction. I think if you guys want to repeat the e5 line, you might want to try either king c2 or king c3 for white and see if the king's better placed on the c file so rook e8 to e4 isn't check.
Right. Yeah, it seems so counterintuitive because it's like the king it seems super exposed on c2, but after playing that game, it's like, okay, maybe that's the way. It's just, it's so hard to see, like, I definitely struggle with, like, initial moves that feel wrong in the game. Like, how far do I go in calculating and seeing if they're actually good down the line, and how much do I trust my calculation? So, I feel like this is good training for that.
Yeah, let me show you guys one line just as an example of how I think about this position for white. Let's play e5 king c3. And that move almost looks like the craziest because a few moves ago in the opening, we were trying to defend a pawn on c3 against that bishop. We were like, rook c1 as fast as possible. Let's defend the c3 square because that bishop's so scary. Now I'm running my king onto that square, right? But, okay, I'm threatening knight e5, which would be really, really good for white, right? So I'm gonna just follow my thinking for a moment for you to give you a sample variation. Bishop to g4. Fighting for control of e5 and d4. Now I will play pawn takes e5 for white. So if black wants to get back their pawn, they need to trade on f3, right?
Yeah.
Are you following the line so far?
Yeah.
Black can throw in rook takes d1, rook takes d1 if they just want to give up the d file, but I'm not going to do that right now. There could be some tactical reason, but... So now we're going to go bishop takes f3, g takes f3, bishop e5 check, recovering the pawn. The white king just keeps chugging up the c file, you know, and in the endgame you don't care that much about getting checked, right? The king goes king c4 now. And so let's just consider this position for a moment after 19 king c4. Material's equal. I've doubled my own pawns, right? But what's the premise of what white's doing? Well, they're looking to maybe trade one or both rooks, move the king up to c6, take the a pawn. They're just trying to win with their a pawn, basically, right?
It's just insane to me that you can see all of that, like, after, you know, you're like, okay, where do I move this king out of the way? And you get to this point in your head and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it depends partly on bishop h2 not being a great move for black in this position, which you'd have to tactically double check, right? But the idea would be like bishop h2 f4, that the bishop can't get out without at least sacking the g pawn, which doesn't look good for black. And yeah, if black ever goes rook d1, then part of how we're trying to win is to just play rook d7 at some point, right? Just say our rook's better or something. And if black does nothing here, I might go a4, a5, a6, moving nothing else, right? Imagine that technical approach to this position. a4, a5. Because, you know, I don't know if I want to play king takes c6 with both rooks on the board. And I don't know if I want to play rook d8, bishop takes a7, rook a8 just yet, where you win back the pawn on a2, right? But every move my pawn gets closer to a4, a5, a6, I'm winning a race for later, right? And at some point, I will bring my king take on c6 and go king b7, or I'll trade rooks on the d file and play bishop takes a7, or something like that, right? So you can see the premise of how this position could be a way of pressing an opponent. And hopefully that's just a useful little tidbit.
Yeah, it feels wrong, and then you actually look at it and you're like, wait, this king is oddly safe on c3 because the e5 is falling, or there's like, how do I even use that g7 diagonal? Yeah, that's really nice.
All right, so we got Rachel with white now. We'll go through the moves together audibly again. And
Okay.
Rachel, you have a choice between rook d1 or rook c5 when we get to move 15.
Okay. Cool. I take it and play e4. And then what's the move here? Knight f3 or
Bishop e3.
bishop e3? Okay. Rook c1?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
queen d2, sorry.
Queen
Oh,
d2.
Oh.
okay.
Sorry.
I don't remember which order I castle and play queen a5 in, though.
You want to go queen a5 first. Black goes
Okay.
queen a5 and cd4 first to give white no choices.
Okay, okay. I guess I'm castling.
So you castle and I play knight f3?
Yeah, and then I play... Where does my bishop go?
Oh,
I play knight c6 first.
Oh, you play knight c6 and I play bishop b5 and somehow trade them?
I think I play rook d8 first
you can also play rook d8
I think
first
both
if
are
you
options.
want. And then
Okay.
bishop b5 is played because white sees knight c6 coming.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I guess it's the same thing. So let's just, it doesn't really matter.
Okay, and then now I can decide between rook c5 and rook d1.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
All right. Have
Okay.
another great game.
Okay.
Bye.
Bonne chance.
Yeah, so Gefilte Fish is asking if these two endgame students know just how bad my own history of endgame play is, how weird it is to have me as an endgame sensei here. Yeah, they know that I was terrible at endgames for almost my entire life, avoided them like the plague. Even up 3 pawns, my queen would run away from the opponent's queen as if it was the Black Death. They know how long the endgame was in coming for me. All right, so we get a different look. Rachel goes for rook c5. This move stops e5 pretty much, it looks like, because of knight takes e5. Rook c6 is somewhat less advantageous for white in general because of bishop b7 and taking here. I mean, we could analyze a longer line if we wanted to. Bishop e4, rook takes e7, maybe bishop takes f3, g takes f3, bishop d4. Looks very close to equal, but yeah, with this pawn structure, white's not in good shape probably. There might be some other details to it. So rook c5, I think Anushka's first instinct in these positions is f5. From her having a little bit more Grunfeld experience. Now with the pawn on b7, the move e5 is almost always bad because of d5. Right? But with the pawn on c6, the move e5 is better than normal. So Rachel's not wrong to be looking at e5. But I think she'll go for f5 here. Oh, she's done something totally different. Interesting. a5, we get a totally different look. So let's try and see if we can figure out what Anushka came up with like as an idea here. It's possible that it was sort of defensive against the possibility of white playing rook a5 and leaving her passively defending the pawn on a7. But normally Anushka's pretty aggressive and ambitious, not really thinking as defensively as offensively. So there's probably something that she's wanting to do. Maybe she wants to drive this pawn further down the board so that at some point when she attacks this pawn, the pawn's going to be even more of a threat with this bishop and maybe this bishop. She knows that white's not really threatening rook c6, bishop b7. Maybe she just is not really worried about what is Rachel doing. She wants to see if Rachel has any great plan for white. And meanwhile, she just calmly expand this pawn here on the a file. Make some more room for black's queenside pieces. In a way, this develops the rook on a8. On a8, the further you push this pawn. Another move in that style would be rook to b8. It's a move that I've thought of here, and I think maybe white would play king c2 in response, just covering rook b2, preparing to just trade off some more pieces maybe, get off the file of this rook. And in general, I think white's plan is something like knight e5 and rook to b1 and just make some trades, leave black with these bad pawns, and just trade off some things, and then also your king will maybe be closer than theirs after some trades. Let's see. So Rachel goes to this extra file, which looks reasonable to me. And now you might start to have threats of rook c6 as well because bishop b7 is out. In addition to the fact that it's just glorious to have another file, right? I mean, how many files would I like to have to my name? 2 at all times. 2 files. Yeah. And every file you conquer, I mean, some people get excited about winning a pawn, but winning a file is pretty similar. It's really, really nice. Depends on how rare files are. In positions with, 6 open files, taking a file is not as big a deal. In a position with 2 open files, yeah, it's really good. So scarcity, supply and demand of files, is actually something that applies in chess. All right, we get bishop g4 going after the d4 square, right, by looking to remove the knight. And now, important choice here for Rachel between defending this pawn with the king, right, or plopping this knight e5 move. Now, knight e5, I think, is kind of the point for white here. But that is not going to be the case in every single position, and it's up to Rachel to sort of have a look at it and estimate how good it is right here. Winning a diagonal is great too, says Beastie. Yeah, winning a diagonal can be really nice too. That is true. So as white, well, first I would look at knight e5, and then I would look at the king moves. First of all, if black trades on e5, like the simplest option, the first thing is, like, Rachel would have to know or believe that this endgame is very nice for white despite opposite colored bishops. The remaining black bishop's not very good. White plays f3. Pawn structure is good. We've got the file. We've got the targets. Very active pieces for white. So that looks very nice. Black could try something with f6, and then e5. I guess we take, and maybe try this move. Bishop h6. Try and cramp the black king a little bit. We're threatening rook f6. I didn't go to f4 because I wasn't sure about bishop f4, g5, where my bishop was going. So here, come to h6. Looking at rook f6. Looking at rook b7, rook c7, landing all the rooks. And it looks really nice for white, right? Got an isolated pawn and some active pieces for white, you know? So, yeah. That looks pretty good. Rachel's made a choice, and she's gone for knight e5, and not even that long on the move, 1 minute and 13 seconds. So, okay, that's a good sign. Good sign for Rachel being willing to play this move so quickly. I've seen some positions sometimes where black can just keep the bishop pair with the idea of, you know, more dynamic stuff coming and allow knight c6, but it looks hard to believe here, right? It might even be bishop a2 would be the next move. But can that be? Say we attack this piece. Is there any tactic for black? We're threatening rook a2. We're threatening knight d8. It probably doesn't work here. I think Rachel's being distracted a little bit here by her chat as she plays. Massive raid, friend chatting her up. Hard to stay on it. So yeah, so Anushka doesn't see a way to deal with knight takes c6, and I think this was not a great position for black to allow knight takes c6. I don't really see how it would work. So she goes to the opposite colored bishops and then continues gaining space with this pawn, takes it off the target square as well. So that makes sense, but is she allowing rook e7, which would take apart her remaining dark squares? When I first saw this position, I may have played a line with f6, also hanging the e-pawn. Let's go back and check the tape, shall we? Folks will be screaming at me in chat. This was my variation. f6, rooks, yeah. That was a really useful line before. Oops, la. Okay, so we're even, Anushka. We both forgot about the e-pawn. The e-pawn looks like a very big deal to David. That looks like it frees up this pawn majority in the center, right? To start being like a thing that can make past pawns. Plus, it breaks the dark squares around black's king. It just, you know, they're so weak then, easy for white to create attacks, even in this endgame. So, yeah, Rachel's in really, really good shape here immediately. Does she take the pawn? She does. Any reaction from her opponent? Dons a baseball cap. Is it a thinking hat or an I don't want to see it hat? We'll find out. I guess the idea would be like bishop e6 here. There's no d5 yet. But then white plays a3, which Anushka doesn't exactly want. She wants to get her pawn all the way to a3. She's got her, you know, her big dreams. So she might even play a3 here before bishop e6. Now, you know, bishop e6 is not bad because after a3 you can neutralize white's b file, cut the rook out, and, you know, keep going from here. It's not the end of the world just because you lose a pawn with opposite colored bishops. But I could see Anushka playing this very aggressive a3 move. It's in keeping with her general plan for the game, you know, and the idea would be she's looking at some position like this, right, where she's hoping this a pawn is just going to be something that Rachel can't deal with. Let's see, a move came in, bishop e6 first. Okay. Why not bishop e6 first? Asks somebody in chat cleverly. Bishop e6. I would guess that Anushka didn't want this pawn coming to a4, fixing her pawn on a dark square. That's my guess. Yeah. That's my guess. Both players using their time relatively well throughout these games. They're spending some time, but they're not tanking. They're doing a really good job of playing, you know, playing mid-range. I keep shaking up the time control on them, which is difficult and challenging, but you know, I have like different goals with each position and with what I want them to be working on. So in a sense, it's making it hard for them, but I'm continually giving them what I think is appropriate for what they're up to, and they're doing a good job of keeping up with it, rolling with all the different terrains I make them play on. And it's not easy to, you know, to just be ready for any challenge, to be thrown into this endgame or that endgame or this middle game or this opening, and, you know, this time control, that time control. Yeah, so as I was saying, they're keeping up well with all kinds of different challenges, and they're very good sports about it all, you know, to put themselves in this position. Rachel's thinking a long time when it seems she more or less has to play a3. What else might she really be considering here from white's side? Yeah, she hasn't played anything else here. What else could she be doing? Because, like, I feel rook b2, a3 would just make things worse for white, right? That's basically Anushka's dream. Okay, we got a move, finally. A3 comes in. Yeah, I'm not sure what she was thinking about so deeply there. It'd be interesting to find out. Here comes bishop b3, locking the file. And the bishop's just happy now, right? It anchors that pawn. It anchors that pawn. This pawn's far advanced, so if the rooks ever get in behind, that pawn's going to be very weak. There'll be very quick counterplay for black. Now, on the other hand, the white king is near here, which could help a little bit. But still, with the bishop, the black rooks can, force their way through a king, generally. So now she go rook c1 and pressure this pawn. That's the obvious repositioning. There's also a question of, what's the priority on bishop h6, trapping the king. But I don't think we can allow rook takes d4 check. So, yeah, rook c1 and rook c8. Those moves were clear and quick. Quick and clear for them. Queer and click. Click and queer. So now, yeah, can white put any more pressure, huh? Maybe king d3 to free the bishop on e3. We got to do something to free that bishop, because pretty soon black's going to play king f8 otherwise. Start booting the rook. It's not the end of the world to send the rook over here. But it could be amazing if we could somehow go, bishop g5, bishop f6, something like that. I kind of like playing rook c5 to put my king on its ideal square, right? Instead of on d3, where it's a light square and on the file with the rook. Rook c5, and then king f8. We have to back off. Then we bring our king. I mean, we still have our pawn. We're backing off, but with our pawn, we're putting all the pieces on the best square. So that's my instinct for white. Let's put all the pieces on the best squares we can, instead of trying to keep the rook on e7 with bishop g5. Why is the rook better on e7 than b7 anyway, David? You just don't like retreating, man. Sometimes it's good to just back off, get some room for the rook. So rook c5, yes. Right on, Rachel. Right on. It's great seeing Rachel turning into an endgame player very, very rapidly. I feel like before we started sparring between her and Anushka, and before she started reading 100 Endgames You Must Know with Anushka, I think just maybe two months ago or so, Rachel probably had very limited endgame exposure. You have to remember, folks, not only was it not the first part of the game that she studied, she's a pretty new player, and she plays in a very aggressive tactical style. So when you look at her tournament games, she's had maybe one end game per tournament when she plays. So very, very little experience. And I think she's making up with it with a lot of online games she's played, right? She's built up some experience there, probably. Because she does have some decent sense for, the ebb and flow and where to put the pieces. Fighting for positioning little by little with all the pieces. This rook c5 move is a nice one. Yeah, king f8's been played, sorry. So here it's going to be between rook b7 and rook a7. Similar moves. Just getting out of the way. One of them you're on the b file, the other you're on the a file, which also kind of stops black from using the b file because their bishop on b3 gets stuck defending the a pawn. I don't think there's a huge evaluation difference probably between those two moves. Rachel's getting a little bit low on time here, and there's a long way to go in this endgame. She's holding on to her extra pawn, she's holding on to her position, but she needs to save some time for the breakthrough plan, not for choosing what square to put this rook on. It's just rook e5 f6 looks kind of dumb, so if you're choosing between b7 and a7, that's the kind of choice you don't want to agonize over. You know, I'm very quick and casual about saying, you know, either of those moves is fine. And that was 1 minute and 30 seconds. You know, she wants that to be more like 10 or 15 seconds with the time control they're playing here. And with the 5 minutes she has left, or she had 7 minutes left to finish this game, because it's going to be a difficult one. All right, we got a question from HMD. Wanted to ask if there was an issue with rook c7 after bishop e6. Let's go check that out. Bishop e6, rook c7 here, right? Yeah, this kind of, HMD, you're kind of playing into Anushka's dream with that. And I think I mentioned it earlier in the live position. I actually gave a variation like this. And that this is kind of what Anushka or Blood Queen has in mind for black. She wants to get a lot of counterplay with this A pawn. So given that the C pawn is a bit of a weakness and this A pawn is a potential big strength, trading these two pawns for white is not desirable. So doing some version of, you know, rook C1, bishop A2, rook C6, or rook C7, bishop A2, rook A1 could be maybe specifically the variation you're kind of asking about. Could look like this, this, this. This is not generally desirable for black, for white, because you're creating such a strong counterplay for the opponent. I mean, look, here's like a weird point. Black could go rook here, rook here, rook here, and just go after C2, right? And immediately very active for black. The endgame's a draw, despite white being up a pawn. So part of white's play is based on this c6 pawn being a weak pawn. When your opponent has a weak pawn, that's really an important part of your strategy. You don't want to trade that pawn. And in general, if you're trying to win and you don't yet have enough to be winning, and Rachel has one extra pawn in an opposite colored bishop ending, so she does not yet have enough to be winning, right? She doesn't yet have enough to be winning. When you don't yet have a big enough advantage to be winning, then you want to keep more pawns on the board more often. But especially this is like our target weakness. We're trying to make black suffer around it, right? See there, it's isolated it, and black's defending it with their rook, which means white's rook is better placed than black's rook. And what do we owe this difference in activity to? 100% to the weakness of that pawn. That's what's giving us the better rook, you know? Okay, h5. Throws in a check. h5 is a good move by Anushka, by the way, here. Good defensive move. If white were allowed to, white would like to play g4, stopping h5, and then h4, h5, looking to create a second weakness on the king side. For sure, that's a huge plan for Rachel if given time, and Anushka found the moment to prevent it. So we get this. Now the pawn on d4 gets defended by the king, going to its best square. Yes, yes, yes. Now, what we can start thinking, now Rachel's got almost all the pieces on the best squares. She's got her extra pawn here in the center, but she can't push through her extra pawn and make a queen, right? So we need a different plan for white here. What would be a plan to improve the position here for white? One thought I have is to have this bishop improve to the f6 square while harassing that piece. And then look for the idea of h3, g4, open a file on the king side and play for rook h8 checkmate. That's the first plan that comes to my mind to try and improve white's position from here. Bring the bishop here to own the dark squares, then trade a pawn on the king side with g4 in order to get the h file. Probably not the only plan, but that's one nice one. What else could we do? We could go rook b6 and try and just break black on the c pawn. Oh yeah, that's an obvious plan too. Idea would be black will play rook d6 at some point, then all their rooks are undefended, right? There's like pins and pins. And then maybe at some point you could play d5 as a break and win the second pawn. Rook d6 played in advance by Anushka. I think I know. She wants to defend this pawn here and potentially vacate this rook from here. We'll see. We'll see. Definitely a major suffering position for black. Because you're kind of playing, hoping to put up enough resistance to save a draw. There's kind of like a feeling like maybe after 6 hours, you know, if you play this in a tournament, maybe after 6 hours you eventually lose. And what did you do all this work for? But there are people who are just tough, even in these situations. They hang around, they play the tough moves, and then they save some points. They don't do it for nothing. There are 2 Endgame books that I read that had a great impact on me. One was Endgame Strategy by Shereshevsky, and the other was Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual. The latter, the manual, I would only recommend to players over 2200 and mostly over 23 or 2400. The Endgame Strategy I recommend to anybody in the 1400 plus range. It can already be a fun book. All right, here comes Rook F6. White kind of walked into that move a little bit, forcing a retreat. So I don't think Bishop F4 was precise. And Rachel gets pushed back. And, you know, her time resources for finding a breakthrough dwindle a little bit more. So, yeah. She's going to have trouble pulling this off with the time she has. Yeah. Trying to play such a tough endgame with 3 minutes while chatting. It's definitely getting hard. Maybe a move like F3 to free up the bishop a little bit. That just got sent into kind of a passive retreaty zone. Instead, she goes for it without improving her stuff first. Okay. I mean, she's a pretty good calculator, so this might work here. But it's a very committal move, you know, where I would prefer to have my pawn on F3, my bishop, you know, come back out to E5, really restrict the squares for the opponent's pieces. But she goes for it with her E-pawn still undefended. Rook E8 from Bloodqueen. And now you just calculate pawn takes, rook takes, C7, right? D takes C6, rook takes E4, C7. This is just a straight up calculation here, right? The bishop on E3 and the pawn on F2 are still holding each other together. Takes, takes, push. Looks winning. Rachel goes for bishop D4 instead, taking the rook. Will Anushka's poker face hold up to that? Probably. Oof. I mean, I assume winning the rook also wins. I don't know that anything wins harder than pawn takes and just queening. Bishop D4, okay. That's why Rachel went for D5 here, with stuff still dangling on both sides. She knew she had a secondary threat here with bishop D4. Takes, takes, takes. And we get first blood.
I should have resigned like a long time ago, so I apologize. I was just grieving my pawn.
Oh, no, I would have told you to resign if I thought you should have. You're good.
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't
okay.
think you should have. Yeah.
I felt like I was pretty dead.
I also suspect that position is long-term dead, like you. And it makes it one of the hardest positions to defend in a tournament because you know that you might be playing for 3-4 hours and then at the end you get nothing for all your work. But you can save it occasionally if you're tough enough to keep playing, and you were tough enough to keep playing, so that's good. It definitely requires a lot of skill for white, and Rachel was getting low on time. She was down to 2-3 minutes, and I don't know that she had a plan for winning until she found the tactics with d5 bishop d4. Rachel, you worked out like a certain winning method, or were you still building?
I mean, I just, I guess like when I played a3 bishop b3, I figured that like the a3 pawn is really really hard to get rid of, if not impossible to get rid of. So then I was like, okay, I can just focus on trying to get the c pawn, or just like putting pressure on the c pawn.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, just some kind of like d with like break with the d pawn and like just pressuring the weak c pawn. But that was like the scope of the plan.
Okay, so you're getting pretty close to having an idea how you're going to win the game. If we go back like 4 or 5 moves, let's say Anushka didn't bring the rook off on that adventure to f6, you would have brought your rook to b6 to attack the c-pawn more, and then try to play d5 when one of her rooks is undefended. Is that kind of the...
Yeah, I was thinking about rook b6, yeah. I mean, I wanted to put both rooks on the 7th rank, but like with the bishop on b3, I didn't think there was much hope there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I probably would have played rook b6 and then kind of went from there.
Yeah.
Maybe like king c3 and maybe even, I don't know. King c3 and then try for some kind of d5. But I mean, the bishop's covering d5 and yeah, so I wasn't too sure exactly how it would go, but just to like force the 2 rooks to stay guarding the c6 pawn, I thought that was a good start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good job. I think that knight e5 probably a good decision, right? You were willing to play the opposite colored bishop ending. Some people would fear that you don't have enough to win if you go for opposite colored bishops, but that is, I think, kind of the point of this line for white, is to be able to press some of those positions based on, superior piece placements, right? Partly the king, partly that weak pawn on c6. So I think it's a good judgment to try and play this endgame as white. That's what white's looking to do. And I guess, Anushka, your move a4 without defending the e7 pawn was probably too aggressive.
That was a blunder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made the same blunder, by the way, in analysis when I was watching the game.
Okay. I wanted to go for f5. I don't know why I didn't, because when I'm looking at it now, well, now that I can put all the moves on the board, I like it. But when I couldn't see the moves played out, I didn't like it. So I guess this is helpful for in a tournament game.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, f5, not f4.
Yeah, where do you like f5?
I guess after rook b1.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know how I felt after f5, e5, but obviously it's great. So, I mean, not obviously, maybe it's bad. I think it's great. I don't know why I didn't go for this.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. So, yeah, I'm probably going to have to leave you guys in a little bit, but clearly this gives us some paths or some clues of what we could look down, right? We could look at f5 for black as a break. I figured that was your first instinct in these positions, Anushka, so there was something that really that you were investigating with a5, which is more of like a newer idea for you. I figured maybe you were dreaming of going a5, a4, bishop e6, and making the a pawn pretty strong. I was kind of like,
why not do that? Like, what happens if I do that?
Right. Like, what is white up to? Why don't you have the time to just improve the a pawn and see what she comes up with? Yeah. And I think also one thing for us to pick up on is if we're going to play bishop g4, we have to be very we have to expect knight e5 from white, so you have to have some reason to think that knight e5 is not particularly good in that position. Otherwise, bishop g4 is kind of asking for it. You could have just kept moving your a pawn to some extent, right? And kept ignoring what she did. And as it turns out, the bishop g4, knight e5, bishop e5, rook e5, it ended up just making your plan a little bit worse because you'd spent time trading off one of your bishops, right? You could have maybe done the same thing, like a4, rook takes c6, a3 maybe, right? Experimented with some position like that, and
Mhm.
the fact that you haven't played bishop g4, fine. It's not hurting you. In fact, at some point here, bishop g4 might be better when white doesn't have knight e5. So you can just sort of leave
Yeah.
that move hanging. So that's like a
It's a
pattern for
good
us to
Grunfeld
always
thing to know.
keep track of, right? Is bishop g4, knight e5 in this kind of endgame position, checking on it. And I would say overall, Rachel did a really great job of playing an opposite colored bishop ending. So that's very nice to see. She showed good handling of it. When she played rook c5 in order to put her king on the best square on c3, that was very good technique in particular, because the king's going to be so much better on c3 than anywhere else at that point. So that was very nice. And yeah, so we've got some things to investigate in the future. We can look at an f5 plan for black. And if we look at that rook d1 e5, we've got king c3 or king c2 to look at. And that's an interesting position that we could play out once or twice.
Right.
Yeah. Any questions from either of you on what we've just seen today?
No, I think the first idea that you gave of like king c2, king c3 was super helpful, because I had that, like, that was like the inspiration for playing king c3, because I was looking at it and I was like, okay, like the king on the d or the e files, like there's just ways to pin the pawn and create havoc, but then I was like, wow, the king on c3 is really safe.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know if I would have came up with that idea if we hadn't looked at that in the first game.
Yeah, actually, you got to play this move rook c5 twice this game. And
Yeah,
one of the
yeah,
points of the
and-
rook c5 move, both times you played it, one of the points of it is to be able to bring the king up to c3 without blocking the rook on c1. It was first your first rook, and then your second rook went through the same route because the other one had already gone c1, c5, e5, e7, right? And then the second one followed rook c1, rook c5.
Yeah.
Sometimes
No, I felt this e5. Yeah. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was going to say sometimes the king has to get in the way of the rooks because it just has to go to that square already. But rook c5 is trying to get an even better version of it.
Yeah. No, I was really happy to put I felt like c5 was a really nice square for the rook, and I didn't want her to have c5 or to be able to play c5 with the pawn at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So just blockade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, if you've got some more training time, you obviously have a position that you could play a couple more times, right? Normally, you would want to get 4 to 6 games with this position, especially since you're playing between rook d1, rook c5, or whatever. I don't have time for 6 games today. Sorry. But, and again, you could try varying the time control as you like, right? You could play faster to get some more experience, or you could put on a 30-second increment and 1 or 2 minutes to get sort of a, real tournament condition feel.
Okay.
So you can play around with that depending on how much time you have and how many reps you're trying to get. And again, it's fine. Whatever you don't do, it's fine, right? You don't have to get to everything. You don't have to know everything about this position. But everything we're doing is just giving us a couple more weapons for the future.
Yeah. No, this king c3 idea is definitely a huge weapon that I will have in the back of my mind in the tournament. So, yeah. Thank you for that.
Cool. All right. I will kick off then. Either of you going to stay on?
Yeah, I'm down to keep
I'm down
playing.
to spar it. Yeah, like maybe like 2 more times, one each color, and then we can figure out a time control that works.
Great.
Yeah.
I will head to my channel, send you all a raid, and I'll be in touch. I know I owe some instructions. So yeah, enjoy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
so much, David.
I'm gonna shout out ChessDojo.
Yeah, me too. It's late/early here, so I think I'd best sign off. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Screws.
Goodbye,
Thank you,
Screws.
David.
Bye.
Okay. Hi, David.
Cheers, folks. Be well.